Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on YouTube. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
I had a dream.
Hashem told you to dance in a tango contest?
A dancing teacher wants to tango with you?
Critics are raving about Tango Shalom. It's clever and inventive, with right chemistry on and off the dance floor.
You're a lunatic!
A funny and thoughtful family film with a warm heart and a playful spirit. From the director of My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh, there's my Fernando.
Tango Shalom, in select theaters this weekend.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, still undefined, yet we're searching, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And once again, I am Robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 742. 742 episodes since the first one, which was a documentary episode about my friend Greg Smith, cosplayer extraordinaire and a man who can build and fix anything. It's been a long journey, folks. And during the entirety of this journey on Robservations, even before Robservations started, I was, of course, working on the film Tango Shalom. I started really working in earnest in May of 2016 on a film. Now, whenever you work on independent movies, I've often said that making a film, making any film, especially an independent film, is an inherently optimistic act. Because everyone who sets out on making a movie hopes they're going to finish it. They know they're going to finish it in their heart of hearts, and they hope people will watch it. Which is, I think, a good thing. Whether it turns out the way you want it to turn out, that's another thing entirely. And how it is received by the public, the audience that you've made it for, that's something else as well. Now, one of the things that I have learned when you make a film or you make anything that is to be consumed by the public, it is going to be critiqued. People are going to love it. People are going to hate it. And all the spaces in between. Sometimes, I mean, immediately when you read a pan or somebody hates what you've done, your immediate impulse is to jump into the fray and defend yourself and defend your work. I have learned this as a truism. Do not. You can't. It is a losing proposition. You're never going to win that one. You have to allow the work to stand up for itself and allow it to be scrutinized. And if your film is pilloried by everyone, well, do what Johnny Depp as Ed Wood said in the movie Ed Wood. Well, my next one will be better. That's the answer. So you can't ever, as much as you want to, you just have to let the work stand, and you can't be consumed by it. I will say this, however. It's really nice to get great notices on your film. But in a way, I do find that's very life-affirming and it makes you feel good. But I do find that criticism is actually more helpful because you learn from it. And I actually really appreciate, even if something, I've made things that have been eviscerated. Free Enterprise, for instance, people either really love it or they hate it. People have said it's the worst movie they've ever seen. But if people have good, cogent criticism, as scathing as it may be, I find it helpful. And I will say this, though. I have noticed recently, even with Tango Shalom, there's 2 reviews in particular which were agenda-based. And they weren't exactly reviewing the film so much as coming after, and the people, these 2 articles in particular, one was particularly mean-spirited, and one was, it became very personal, and I thought that was interesting. As a matter of fact, there was even great assumptions made on the part of the reviewer. You can find the review. I won't tell you who wrote it or where it came from, but I found it really interesting that they brought up the death of one of the principal players in the movie and assumed that that person's death had something to do with the film sitting on a shelf because it wasn't good enough. And I found all of those things very strange because, 1, they really didn't belong in a review, and 2, they were inaccurate. A cursory glance at the movie, Tango Shalom has a copyright date of 2021. And to be honest with you, it wasn't entirely finished until mid-August of this year. It came out on September 3rd, but because of the pandemic, it wasn't entirely done. We couldn't deliver it to our distributor, and we were not looking for a distributor very long. The plan was to release it to film festivals in 2020, but the pandemic hit. So our film was never even seen by anyone until 2021. And we sent it to various festivals. It had its world premiere in Jaipur, India. It actually was one of the very first films to play at the first Islamic comedy film festival, as far as I know, in Morocco, and it won the Audience Award, which I thought was quite interesting. And it also played in Turkey, where it did very well, and it's played at film festivals, and it's won awards and all that. So I'm very proud of Tango Shalom. I'm very proud of what it's become and all the work that we put into it. And I would say that Tango Shalom is exactly the movie that we all set out to make. Whether you like that movie or not, well, that remains to be seen. And everybody, I've heard lots of different reviews of it, and it's great. It's currently playing in theaters now in Los Angeles, in New York. It opened in Miami, all throughout South Beach, in Palm Springs, and also in Scottsdale, Arizona. So those are the places you can see it. Hopefully it'll keep playing more cities. I can't believe that it's spent 3 weeks in the box office, in theaters, playing during a pandemic with virtually no advertising budget. Other movies have what are called P&A, prints and advertising, because every time you send it to a theater, it costs money because you have to make a DCP, a digital cinema package, so the theaters can actually play your movie. We didn't have a marketing budget. You know, it's all been grassroots. We mailed postcards to people. We did what we could. So I'm extremely excited about the state of Tango Shalom. I'm incredibly proud of the movie. I'm incredibly proud of all the work, and it embodies the spirit of independent cinema. And I mean, I could teach an entire semester-long college course about how Tango Shalom actually got made, and every class would be different. I know you people are sick of hearing me talk about this movie, but it's out in theaters, and the only people that are going to promote it are us, the people that made it. And pretty extraordinary. And so I don't mind bad reviews. What I do mind are reviews that don't actually review the film itself and make wild assumptions about the people that made the movie and the disposition of the film, which are completely inaccurate. Which, hey, if you're going to write articles and be a journalist, be a journalist. Don't write things that are incredibly inaccurate. Why not call somebody that's involved with the movie? Call the film company. Ask them and check your facts. If you're gonna call yourself a journalist with your 2 different colleges that you went to, I would say be a journalist. And if you have questions about the origins of something, all you have to do is contact the film company. They have press people. There are people that will answer your questions rather than putting out wildly inaccurate assumptions in the work that you do. That's all I would ask. You can hate us. You can hate our film. I have no problem with that. But If you're going to write articles about the movie and critique it, that's fine. But if you make assumptions about the people in the film, especially about people who've passed away during the production of the movie, it would be nice if you clarified those facts that go along. I mean, at least if you're going to give our film a hatchet job, just make sure that your other assumptions are also correct. So, no problem. I have no problem with any bad reviews of the movie, but I do take exception when certain people who passed away during the film are not represented well, and they don't deserve that. Their memory doesn't deserve that. So shame on you. But anyway, that said, yesterday on Yom Kippur, no less, UNESCO, the United Nations. UNESCO is a United Nations division. And UNESCO is the United Nations Education, Science, and Culture Organization. And here what is their mandate. Their mandate is to seek, this is from their website, to seek to build peace through international cooperation in education, the sciences, and culture. UNESCO's programs contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals defined in Agenda 2030, adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2015. Their vision: political and economic arrangements of governments are not enough to secure the lasting and sincere support of the peoples. Peace must be founded upon dialogue and mutual understanding. Peace must be built upon the intellectual and moral solidarity of humanity. In this spirit, UNESCO develops educational tools to help people live as global citizens free of hate and intolerance. UNESCO works so that each child and citizen has access to quality education by promoting cultural heritage and the equal dignity of all cultures. UNESCO strengthens bonds among nations. UNESCO fosters scientific programs and policies as platforms for development and cooperation. UNESCO stands up for freedom of expression as a fundamental right and a key condition for democracy and development. Serving as a laboratory of ideas, UNESCO helps countries adopt international standards and manages programs that foster the free flow of ideas and knowledge sharing. UNESCO's founding vision was born in response to a world war that was marked by racist and anti-Semitic violence. 70 years on and many liberation struggles later, UNESCO's mandate is as relevant as ever. Cultural diversity is under attack, and new forms of intolerance, rejection of scientific facts, and threats to freedom of expression challenge peace and human rights. In response, UNESCO's duty remains to reaffirm the humanist missions of education, science, and culture. Now, that said, I certainly am not 100% just rah-rah United Nations. There are policies that I disagree with. I think that what they just stated in there, they've not always been a friend to Israel, especially lately. But I do appreciate what their mandate here is. And look, you know what? All you can do is try. But what I did found fascinating was that yesterday, during the holiest of all Jewish holidays during the year, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, UNESCO tweeted out an endorsement of Tango Shalom. And on one hand, I read a really eviscerating review that made me incensed. And I guess I'm responding to it here, but not the review. I mean, it was a hatchet job. And I have to say, I admired just how visceral of a hatchet job it was. But that's fine. I objected to, there was clearly an agenda behind the review, and some of the things they just were wildly inaccurate about, such as whether the film sat on a shelf or for some reason we had a problem finding a distributor. For the record, our distributor, Vision Films, thank you, Vision, they found us. We were on the festival circuit, and the movie, one of the people, Kristen Bedno, who works for Vision, she was a judge at the Brooklyn Film Festival and saw the film, and they came after us. So we were not looking for a distributor very long. As a matter of fact, we hadn't started a search for a distributor at all. We were just putting the film on the festival circuit, but it's always the hope that you will find a distributor. So anyway, I was gobsmacked by this tweet yesterday. UNESCO, who I just read you about, who they are, the United Nations. Professor, you know what, I'm never going to be able to pronounce this right. Piankar Upadhyaya? What a name. What an incredible name. Professor BU currently serves as the UNESCO Chair Professor for Peace and Intercultural Understanding. And his quote about the movie, Tango Shalom spreads the message of interreligious solidarity. We are including a write-up on the film in our UNESCO compendium on interreligious dialogue as an example of the innovative trajectory of building peace amid diverse religious traditions. Now, I wish I had that to put on the movie poster because obviously we printed all that stuff earlier. But to be honest, I mean, I'm gobsmacked by this. First of all, I wasn't even aware the people at the United Nations knew anything about our movie, and we are being presented apparently an award in Paris next month. And I mean, beyond anything, I don't make movies for money. I mean, I'd like to get paid for my work because you have to eat and put a roof over your head. But my desire to make films was never born of the idea that one day I'm going to be rich and I'm going to receive all kinds of accolades and people will know my name the world over. I have YouTube for that. No, I make movies because I love doing it. And Tango Shalom was certainly, if you were to calculate how much we made per hour on the film, especially director Gabriel Bologna and myself, it would be pennies. It was a labor of love, and not that I didn't get paid something, I certainly did, but not. I was not remunerated for the. I was not compensated for the for the amount of time we put in on it. It was truly a labor of love. And a family affair all the way around. The Laniato family and the Bologna family were vital to the success and the creation of this movie. But to have that kind of an endorsement from the United Nations, I'm blown away. I can't believe that a little movie that has a limited release and it's astonishing to me. And I don't think that, look, the movie it's a sweet little fable. It has a lot of Borscht Belt humor. It is corny by design. It's a throwback to a different time. And that's how it was conceived and how it was made. And it was done for very little money. And to know that the film had some kind of an effect on people, it truly is the greatest reward you can get. And to have the United Nations endorse the film in such a manner, and also, the idea behind it really was to show that I won't ruin it for anyone who hasn't seen the movie yet, but it truly is the messaging of the film was that all religious traditions and beliefs should be able to exist together. And part of the journey of Moshe Yehuda, the main character's journey, takes him across different religious leaders, and they engage in a dialogue, and it continues through the rest of the film. And a lot of people have said, Rob, an Orthodox rabbi would never set foot in a Catholic church. And I'm like, well, of course, that's probably true. But our movie is a fable, and it's a movie, and it's not supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to be a fable, and it's supposed to be maybe the way the world could be, not the way the world is. And hopefully it's amusing and people find it fun and a lighthearted tale that puts a smile on your face. That was one of the things also, I would hope that anybody who reviews the film, even if they hate everything else about it, they could at least see what the messaging was. Some people apparently can't, but that's okay. All opinions can be listened to. They don't necessarily have to be all considered valid, but you do what you can. But to have this kind of an endorsement for the film, to me, I just want to say I can't tell you what it means. And on Yom Kippur as well. Yom Kippur. Truly the Day of Atonement. You see, in Judaism, the whole point of the Day of Atonement is you are supposed to come before God and basically admit your mistakes, admit what you've done. And it requires that you have insight into yourself, and you have to understand what it is that you've done, and you have to go before God and explain, look, these are the things I've done. And you don't get absolved. You must atone. And that's what I've actually, ever since I was a little kid. So Rosh Hashanah is the new year, and then the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are called the days of awe. And it's all about reflection and introspection. And I've always liked Yom Kippur. I've always, even as a kid, I always thought that what a cool idea, that you must own your own shit, basically, and go before God and explain, because God knows what you've done. He knows what you've done. But do you? And I always thought that was great. So on that day, on Yom Kippur, to have UNESCO put out this tweet, they didn't have to do that, but they did, to get that kind of an endorsement from the United Nations. I mean, did I get money from that? No. Do I get anything that necessarily, maybe it'll translate to the box office. Who knows? That would be nice. But you know what? In my journey through life, when I'm on my deathbed and I think, what cool things happened to me in my life? And I'll say, well, a lot. But this is definitely one of them. It's definitely one of them. To have a project I worked on it's the longest I've worked on any project that's been made so far. If I get my next film made that I will be directing, it'll be a far longer period of time I've wanted to make the film, all the way back to the 80s. But it was pretty great. And, you think about all the intolerance in the world, and you think about the life we've had to spend over the last 2 years, and all the acrimony and all the divisiveness across every single wherever. To have something like this come out of the blue, it just goes to show you just never know what's going to happen every day. And as you know, I try and maintain a positive disposition about life, even when, let me tell you, working in Hollywood, some of the time you really do want to slit your own wrists or spoon out your eyeballs with a teaspoon. It happens a lot. But I'll tell you, when you get an endorsement from the United Nations, it somehow makes everything worthwhile. So happy Yom Kippur to everyone involved with Tango Shalom. And to you guys, because everyone out there, all of you, however you identify from the 28 known galaxies, you've been a very supportive audience. I think one of the best audiences I've ever had. Every day you keep coming back here, you subscribe, you like, you donate to the channel. It's great to have this kind of audience. And I'll tell you, over the last 2.5 years trying to get Tango Shalom out, one of the things that has nurtured my soul when I've wanted to stick my head in a wall has been all of you guys. And my promise to you is, hey, have we finished the film festival yet? We have not, but we are going to. I keep promising, but we will. It's although I will say this, speaking of the film festival, I got a message, and let me see if I can find it. I got a message from Mike Castro, who made one of the great films in the film festival. Mike Castro wrote me and said, this is just the other day, "Hey Rob, I wanted to thank you again for starting the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. We wouldn't have had the excuse to make There's Something in the Silence if it weren't for the creative competition you set up. We actually just started getting into a lot more film festivals. So far, the short was selected to screen at FilmQuest, Austin After Dark, the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival, the Atlanta Horror Film Festival, Fright Fest, and upstate New York's Horror Film Festival. We made a lot of shorts, but this definitely has been the one that's gotten the most attention and positive feedback, especially from festivals. Thanks so much for pushing us to make our movie. Also, I was wondering if you happen to have a high-res version of the IICFF Laurel. I do. I got to send it to you. I forgot. We're drafting up our festival poster, and I'd love to be able to include a good-looking version of the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival Laurel. Thanks again, and I'm still excited to check out Tango Shalom soon." So, again, I want to thank Mike Castro for writing a lovely letter to me, a message. Thank you so much. And congratulations on the film. And I'm glad you made it for the film festival. That does not absolve me of my responsibility, of course, of finally finishing it. We announced our semifinalists, but we will get around to bringing those back. And not a day goes by where I don't get some message from somebody wondering what the hell's going on. Now, I don't like missing super chats. I don't like when I do it, or comments. Sometimes I do because I'm looking at a piece of software that isn't the live chat. Sometimes they, for whatever reason, they pop in late. But there was a couple of super chats that came in. First of all, sent one in yesterday that I didn't get to. And Jer Maninen, who I believe is from Finland, Jer writes in and says, I just saw Dune, and it was amazing. The visuals were so stunning, I felt like I was on Arrakis myself. The clothing, the lore building, the performances are very close to perfection, and after 2.5 hours when the credits rolled, I wanted more. Let it be so. Well, Jer, I'm hoping I feel that way because, my God, I can't wait. Also, apparently, Glenn, I might have missed a couple of Glenn's super chats, which I want to get to. And these are good ones. Glenn is in New Zealand. So I apologize, Glenn. Thank you for pointing out that I missed your super chats. True Lies for TV, says Glenn. I was dubious until I saw Matt Nix's name. Burn Notice was terrific TV. Episodic, but connected. However, from memory, True Lies the movie was a well-crafted mix of comedy and action. Burn Notice had dialogue comedy, but less action comedy. And while I loved TV's Chuck action comedy, I'd love to see True Lies the series lie between the two. Well, Glenn, I'm with you there. I think True Lies would lend itself very well to a series, and if nothing else, maybe Lightstorm will finally get around to releasing True Lies in 4K, along with The Abyss, along with Strange Days, and along with Steven Soderbergh's remake of Tarkovsky's Solaris. Or not remake, but readaptation of Stanislaw Lem's novel, Solaris, because those 4 Lightstorm films are inexplicably not available on Blu-ray or on 4K in the United States. Why? I don't know. But maybe a True Lies TV series would actually get that movie on 4K. And I know Mr. Bastian and I would love to have True Lies on 4K. I really love True Lies. I loved its frothy mix of action comedy. I love that. I am with you 100%. And by the way, I'm sorry I missed your super chat. But thanks for writing in and pointing out that I did. This next letter comes from Brian Parker. I love these. Brian Parker says, "Hey Rob, long-time watcher, first-time writer. I'm an American who has the good fortune of living in Bologna, Italy, and I had the privilege of seeing Villeneuve's Dune last night. I cried. It was perfect. This film is not a narrative remix of a modern holy scripture a la Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. It is a direct translation of the first 62,000 words of Frank Herbert's masterpiece into the language of cinema. Nearly every shot of the film can be traced to a passage from the novel. But then, it suddenly ended. Imagine if Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring ended when Frodo wakes up in Rivendell. Or if the original Star Wars ended when Luke Skywalker meets Han Solo at the cantina. After a running time of nearly 3 hours, the final line of dialogue, which I will not spoil here, is either Villeneuve putting his dick on the table or one of the greatest fuck yous to an audience ever. Unlike Jackson's Lord of the Rings, there is no guarantee that this story will ever be completed by the same team of visionary cinematic artisans. As someone who tries to keep one foot in reality at all times, I fear we never will. If Villeneuve is able to fulfill his vision and adapt the second half of the novel and, God willing, Dune Messiah, it will be the greatest single piece of sci-fi cinema ever made. But this is the Post-Geek singularity, and we don't get to have nice things. I have a hard time believing that general audiences will respond to this movie enough to warrant the completion of this saga. As perfect as it was, I sincerely hope it doesn't become another noble failure, just like David Lynch's effort or Jodorowsky's aborted vision. Live long and prosper, Brian from Bologna. Brian, what a great letter. I'm with you. I do not understand why they wouldn't make Dune all at once. I think if HBO Max existed at the time they were making the movie, that they probably would have. They would have just done it all. But, it's a huge... I just don't understand, because you got to go back to the same place. You're shooting on location, amortizing the costs. Most of the same cast. I mean, there's people we haven't met yet, like Fade. I don't think Fade Ralph is in the film. I don't think the Padishah Emperor or Princess Erlan is in the film either. So there's characters we haven't even met yet. But still, I mean, a lot of what goes on in Dune is on Arrakis. And we have to see Paul turn the tables on the Harkonnens. And we don't see that. Even the David Lynch film had the whole story. So I agree with you. And when I read the script, I understand the movie just ends. It just ends in the middle of the narrative. And you're like, well, wait, what? I don't remember the actual last line of the script. I could call it up, but I won't. But I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you thought that it was an amazing piece of work. And indeed, it is. I'm sure. I can't wait to see it. I'm hoping to see it with Bill Hunt in the next couple days. If there's another screening, I do want to see it in IMAX. I do have my tickets to see No Time to Die in IMAX on the 6th of October. I just got tickets for my friend Charlie de Lazarica, who will be in town. I believe he's in Saudi Arabia right now. I think he's in Riyadh. I'm not sure, but doing work. And I know he's going to be in LA showing his short film Love Bite, so that's cool. And let's hope that Dune is just as wonderful. I mean, it sounds amazing. It looks incredible. We shall see. But you're right. Not for everyone. But I think, the people that love science fiction, it's certainly one for the ages. So I think that's very, very cool. Joe Dick writes in. Joe Dick. And Joe Dick says, "Hi, Rob. I was thinking recently about whether a franchise, when it becomes garbage, if it taints the earlier good stuff. Although we'll always have the good, it's often hard to completely ignore the bad. It's always there in the back of your mind. This isn't exactly on par with, say, a disgraced entertainer, although it can be difficult to separate the art from the artist. It's also often difficult to enjoy the quality bits of a franchise without thinking about how it's gone so far downhill. As good as Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back are, were they tainted that much by Return of the Jedi? A little, but much more so by the prequels and sequels, and those are much harder to ignore. That franchise, though, even for people who still like it and what they're doing with it now, seems increasingly irrelevant. I don't know why we can't get some new space opera. Well, we're getting Dune, but I'm thinking not so much of an adaptation, but something original. Why more of the same thing? I know the answer from a money perspective, and that always takes precedence. Star Wars has that built-in audience. Even bad Star Wars brings in piles of cash, but I can't watch the originals without thinking of how the prequels destroyed a lot of it. Or the sequels, to a lesser extent maybe, but which are still a bit like a problem gambler doubling down and thinking their big score is just around the corner. But they keep losing. Really, the crap that follow the originals shouldn't taint anything for me, but they do. I was never all that much of a Star Wars fan. I like the original trilogy, and I'd rewatch some scenes of it, but rarely rewatch them all the way through. However, I was excited when I heard about the prequels, since I'd missed all the hoopla surrounding the originals. I wasn't born when the first one came out and was too young for the second and barely remember seeing Jedi, so I was excited to get in on the prequels and saw The Phantom Menace in the theater, but spent most of the time checking my watch. The others I waited until I could rent them. Star Trek always mattered a lot more to me. I got to thinking about the Trek movies and whether they were a mistake in the long run, despite some of them being of quality. People slam the most recent Star Trek movies, of course, but even the 2009 movie was garbage. I'm a fan of Simon Pegg, but I didn't like his Scotty. And that wasn't Kirk, that wasn't Spock. Not that the other actors can never play those characters. There are numerous Doctor Who's and numerous Bonds, but this was almost like a parody. Certainly Kirk was a parody. And even the greats like Wrath of Khan might have done more harm than good in the long run, knowing what we know now, what they led to. But each one of the original series movies is like Citizen Kane compared to the TNG movies, where the characters always seemed much less intelligent than in the TV series. And the story therein is often stupid, like Generations and Insurrection in particular. Maybe the producers thought they needed more action than the TV show. They might have figured they could rope in casual fans or even non-fans by making them think it was some Star Wars mindless action. They figured too, I guess, that we wanted Picard to be an action hero. No, that was Patrick Stewart. And that we wanted to see things blow up real good. Picard especially was a moron. TV Picard wouldn't recognize his movie self. Can't disagree with that. The current Picard seems to be from that movie universe, only with an even smaller brain. One of my favorite Free Enterprise lines is when I think Mark describes someone as so dumb they make Forrest Gump look like a candidate for Mensa. That line describes movie Picard and the Picard show Picard perfectly. Ever see Pawn Stars? Picard is now the Chumley of Star Trek. Movie Picard doesn't try to save any of the assimilated Enterprise crew in First Contact, despite his crew, or at least the senior officers, having risked a lot to save him in The Best of Both Worlds, which did a pretty good job, along with those episodes with Jellicoe, of making us think there was at least a tiny chance he wouldn't come back. Movie Picard rides around in dune buggies. Were the TNG movies just so the actors could have a free vacation? Those movies were generally a huge disappointment and had characters acting out of character. Picard is a frat boy, a 23rd century bruh. This might be more like Patrick Stewart than Picard, who, as part of the writing staff for Picard, is either deluded or stupid or both. This is why I wonder if the movies were a good idea or not, despite many of them being good or at least okay. I never really got the love for Star Trek II. It had its moments, but Khan must have really gone squirrely on that desert planet and lost quite a few brain cells too. When Spock died, for me, it didn't have the same impact as it might have had for audiences at the time. When I finally saw Star Trek II, I already knew Spock wouldn't stay dead. That said, overall, I still like Star Trek the Motion Picture, and I like Wrath of Khan. I like most of the TOS movies, in fact, despite their flaws, even Star Trek V, but only because that was the first one I saw. Do you think Star Trek V could be saved in editing? Take out the campfire song, keep Sybok, but remove references to him being Spock's brother? It might have set a precedent, or give some clown the idea to make Burnham Spock's sister. Maybe excise the mountain climbing stuff and the rocket boots. I remember in the commentary for Free Enterprise, you guys talked about generations, and I think it was Mark Altman who pointed out that the things Kirk loved, like riding horses, were things that Shatner liked, not Kirk. Well, that's exactly right. Otherwise, being in space all that time would have been hell for him. Same for the mountain climbing, I'd say. Also, the movie Free Solo showed us that Spock made a mistake in calling Kirk what he was doing free climbing, but to free solo means to climb without any equipment, as Kirk was doing. Free Solo is about climber Alex Honnold, who might have set the record Spock said Kirk was in no danger of breaking. Star Trek V also has the annoying scene of Sybok offering to take their pain away, which Kirk refuses, saying he needs his pain, but Kirk's pain, that of a 23rd century playa, is probably a little different from Spock's pain. But in addition to the TNG characters seeming so dumb in their movies, and the addition of occasional swearing because it was the movies and not on network TV and they could do it, so they did, I wonder if the TOS movies, though less dumb, kind of changed the characters too much. In the original series, the Enterprise was just one of a bunch of Constitution-class ships. I liked that the Enterprise was one of many, and remarkable but unremarkable. An elite crew amongst elite crews. In Ian Banks' culture novels, a character says that any one of them could be a perfect representation of the culture. I think any Starfleet crew member, officer or not, could say the same for the Federation. But later on in the movies and then later the spin-off TV series like TNG, they made too much of the impact that these characters had. Scotty becomes one of the greatest of all-time engineers. Kirk goes from being not just an accomplished, talented captain, but the GOAT of captains. For every Admiral Nelson, there are a bunch of other equally brilliant, equally courageous captains who maybe just weren't as good as at self-promotion. I'd like to think all the ships were having adventures like the Enterprise, and that their crews were equally good. Is Kirk the Nelson of the 23rd century, or just one of a bunch of great captains? I'd prefer the latter. Spock is a little more realistic. Though highly intelligent, they never treat him like a 23rd century Einstein. He does later become an extraordinarily accomplished diplomat, but only one of a great many diplomats, with a specialization in cowboy diplomacy, of course. He's not meant to be one of the great minds of the galaxy. In Requiem for Methuselah, Flint says to Reyna that Spock is not her intellectual equal or even Flint's own. There are a lot of people like this in the real world who would score as genius on an IQ test but don't achieve on the level of your Newtons or your Einsteins. I can't remember the name, but I saw an interview with a former child prodigy who had the high intelligence but not the creativity of an Einstein, and to go with it, you need both. I thought Spock might be like this, which doesn't diminish him, but I think adds a little of the old Spanish fly that is verisimilitude. He specializes in diplomacy, but as a science officer, he's a generalist, and that's what his job calls for. A specialist would be on a starbase somewhere. This also explains Scotty. It's Leah Brahms, not Geordi, who designs starships, but that doesn't diminish the mere ship's engineer. Another thing the TOS movies make too much of is the friendships. In the TV series, it's Kirk, Spock, and McCoy who are friends, and more so Kirk and Spock. Scotty, Sulu, Chekhov, Uhura are all valued crew members, but they're not all friends, and definitely not friends with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. I guess they must bond later on, of course, but I doubt you can often have superior officers with their subordinates becoming friends. I gotta say, I disagree with you, because if they've served that long and they've aged together, they would be friends, and I think their bonds would grow. And remember, with Star Trek The Motion Picture, Kirk went away. For 2.5 years, he was head of Starfleet operations, so even he was removed from his friendships. Spock was on Vulcan, and McCoy was studying Fabrini medicine. So those friendships were blasted apart for a number of years. They were reignited or reconnected with on the Enterprise in Star Trek The Motion Picture. By the time of Star Trek IV, they're all inseparable. All joint BFFs, even if Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are a bit closer. They all go on to become greats in their fields, even Uhura, whose job, I guess, was more difficult than it looked. In Enterprise, they really busted a gut trying to tell us how difficult Sato's job was. So I don't know. I wonder how much of the latter good stuff we'd sacrifice to get rid of the bad. Star Trek isn't ever going to be good again, I think. Kurtzman's reign of terror will continue for years. And that's not speculation anymore. We know now with that new contract. He'll run that franchise into the ground. I'd sacrifice TNG and everything else some days if it would spare us the crap that we're now being given. Not willingly. It would be a tough decision, way harder than a Sophie's Choice. Sometimes in other franchises, I can't help thinking the same thing. What would I sacrifice to be rid of these franchise-destroying... What would I sacrifice to be rid of the franchise-destroying crap? If I came across an Infinity Gauntlet, with a snap I could get rid of the Star Wars prequels and sequels, but what if that could only be done by also getting rid of Empire and Jedi? Jedi, not a loss. Empire, yes. It would be a wrench, but I might axe New Trek, even if it meant saying goodbye to my beloved TNG and all the rest, except Enterprise, which was a proto-Discovery. Maybe it would be better to just have TOS and leave it at that. What if it hadn't been saved after cancellation? Fans would bemoan the loss to this day, not knowing the crap they've been spared, but also being denied the quality as well. People will say, well, you've got the good stuff, that's not going anywhere. But it's definitely been tainted. Kurtzman, JJ, and all the rest have Cosby'd all Star Trek. It's all tainted. Well, of course, I couldn't do it. I couldn't get rid of any of the good just to be spared the bad. Although, I do worry it's only going to keep getting worse until they completely kill it. And it won't be like when they put down Old Yeller after a life of noble service. It'll be more like a patient who's a complete vegetable being kept on life support until decades later it at least goes completely brain dead and they finally pull the plug. But apart from New Trek, I've liked all the Star Trek series. Even Enterprise had its moments. Not many, but it had them. And it had good characters who deserved a better show. Unlike Discovery's crew, who are all a bunch of fuck-ups and morons. But it really was a proto-Discovery. Everything that's wrong with Discovery and Picard has its roots in Enterprise, which is to Discovery and Picard as W is to Trump. Bad, but seemingly a little less bad, only by comparison. Nuff said, and how, Joe Dick. Well, Joe, a great letter, and, you know, I struggle with this. I struggle with this a lot, and, you know, as an imagination connoisseur and loving all of this stuff, it's very difficult to see substandard versions of it made. And I think what's really maddening to me, especially when it comes to Star Trek, is I've been collecting Star Trek novels since I was a kid. Spock Must Die and Spock Messiah, Mission to Horatius, or Horatius, or whatever. Those books were when I was a little kid. And then after Star Trek The Motion Picture came out, when Pocket Books started publishing their novels that are literally ending. They're literally... Star Trek Picard has killed my beloved Star Trek novel series, because Star Trek Picard does not jibe. What the novel series was doing was it was extending the Star Trek universe beyond Voyager. And they were doing, for the last 20 years, there has been a really great Star Trek novel continuity that doesn't always jibe with Star Trek Online, but the books have done a really great job extending the Star Trek universe in very thoughtful, very intelligent ways, because the people that are writing the Star Trek novels, people like David Mack and Dayton Ward and people like that, love and really understand Star Trek. So there were 20 years of great stories, but because none of it jibes with what they did with Picard, they're having a 3-book event starting next month that is going to literally end 20 years of continuity by fabulous writers who have written great Star Trek stories for 20 years, because Star Trek Picard contradicts their post-TNG continuity. So not only are we getting horrifically awful science fiction, and make no mistake, Star Trek Discovery and especially Star Trek Picard are some of the most god-awful televised science fiction. Now, if you like those shows, that's fine. I'm not a gatekeeper. I'm not presenting. I'm not telling you can't. Here's the gate. You can't go through it. You can watch whatever you want to watch. In my opinion, and I probably could, if I wanted to spend the time, I could write I could write a paper, a treatise that demonstrably proves why Star Trek Discovery and Picard are bad storytelling. Because I think you can actually identify bad storytelling, especially in the science fiction genre. And both Star Trek Discovery and Picard are horrifically bad science fiction. Horrifically bad science fiction. Written by people that don't know science fiction. Which seems strange, because the people that wrote the original series, a lot of them were novelists and short story writers and playwrights. They were great writers, which is why they were tapped to write Star Trek scripts in the first place. I don't understand why the people that write Star Trek didn't take a cue from Gene Roddenberry and go have great science fiction writers come in and write stories for them. I don't understand. We're getting television writers who've only ever written television and apparently don't read much, because really Star Trek since 2009, especially the movies are hideously awful and make no sense at all. And the portrayals of the characters, like you said, dude bro Kirk. I don't see a shred of the character of Captain Kirk and Chris Pine. The only character in modern Star Trek since 2009 are the various iterations of Pike that we've seen. And the fact that modern Star Trek has given us 2 iterations of Pike and multiple iterations of Spock shows how creatively bankrupt Star Trek and indeed modern franchises really are. We live in a world that is constantly changing. We live in a world where technology, right now we have, yes, one of them's a billionaire, but we have 3 civilians about to splash down in space. The first civilians that have gone into space. I'd love to see a story. I've often said I read a book called Phases of Gravity by Dan Simmons. And it's a wonderful book. If you don't know Dan Simmons, the TV series The Terror, the first season was based on his book of the same name. And in Phases of Gravity, it is about an astronaut, fictional astronaut, but an astronaut who landed on the moon. And it's decades later, and he's a father with an estranged son. And he's grappling with the fact that the greatest thing he's ever going to do in his life is behind him. Now, how does a man or a woman or a person, anyone, however you identify, how do you as a human being deal with the rest of your life when you know the greatest thing you've ever done is behind you? I know in my own life, people say, well, Rob, you directed one movie 22 years ago, and I don't think that way. That's why Tango Shalom is as much a triumph to me personally and creatively as making Free Enterprise. Have I given up my dreams of directing? No. I look at Cry Macho, not that I'm comparing myself to Clint Eastwood, but as a creator, he's 91 years old. He starred in and directed Cry Macho, which is in theaters this weekend and also on HBO Max. I'm very heartened by this. It proves that you can be the only person who tells you whether or not you're relevant is you. And one of the things that I don't like about modern Star Trek, and indeed a lot of our modern franchises, is the people that are running them just aren't that creative. They're not good writers. They don't have the background. They're not novelists. They're not short story writers. They're not playwrights. They haven't read enough books. They don't have enough of a classical education in order to make something as good as Star Trek the way it was when it first came out. Because the writers back in the 60s had the chops. They weren't just TV or movie writers. They were also novelists themselves. So was Nicholas Meyer, by the way. I mean, I don't think Star Trek 2, to me, for all of its faults, and most of them are alleviated in the director's edition, which thank God is being remastered to 4K finally. To me, the truest Star Trek movie is Star Trek the Motion Picture. It feels like a Star Trek movie, but it carries it, it gives it, and a lot of people, I'm tired, I've heard every criticism of Star Trek the Motion Picture since I was a kid. Watching the director's cut of Star Trek the Motion Picture, there is a sense of awe and wonder in that movie about the cosmos itself that is missing. All of the Star Trek films moving into the big screen, should have a big screen feel. Philosophically, they should have a big screen feel. The 3 J.J. Abrams Kelvinverse movies are brain-dead action films that are not about philosophy. They're not about the cosmos. They're not about the awe and wonder of the universe. They're very small-minded. And I hate that about Star Trek. Star Trek Discovery is terribly small. And it pays lip service when somebody gives a speech. You're supposed to go, see, it's just like Star Trek. But that's not what Star Trek was. Star Trek had all of those things. It had humor. It had character moments. It had action-adventure. But it also had philosophy. And what was great about Star Trek was it was an anthology show. One day they find a planet of Chicago mobs of the 20s. Another day, you find the Doomsday Machine, wildly divergent in tone. But Star Trek did them both great. And unfortunately, the people that have run Star Trek since 2009 are simply not smart enough and good enough to be making Star Trek. I mean, I hate to say it, of all the modern Star Trek, the thing that I have the most hope for is Prodigy. Even though it looks like the least I don't recognize, aside from a Starship and Janeway, I don't recognize Star Trek at all in Prodigy. But the pedigree, I know the writers, and David Mack, one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, consulted on it. So I'll give it a shot. Maybe it'll be some diverting science fiction with interesting ideas. But I think the people making Star Trek are not smart enough to make Star Trek. And that's not a personal attack. It's just I don't think they understand how to do all of the things that the original series did, or even Star Trek the Motion Picture. But great letter, Mr. Dick. I'm sure a lot of people are like, geez, Rob. Once again, I got to go off on a Star Trek rant, which is great. By the way, speaking of Star Trek the Motion Picture, this letter comes to us from Stephen Collins. Uh-oh. Will I get canceled if I read this letter? I'm sure it's not the Stephen Collins. A Stephen Collins, not to say you, sir, are not as valuable as any other human being. This letter comes from Stephen Collins. Hey, Rob. I've wanted to write a letter about the Oscars for a long time. I believe that the Oscars have an identity crisis that seems to care about the ratings more than the actual awards itself. I want to love the Oscars, but I actually care about Oscar history more than the next Oscar occurring. The best thing they're doing is having more diversity, as the Oscar voters are all old white men stereotype should die off. I like how a year after the Oscars so white situation happened, Moonlight won, but we couldn't celebrate it because of how they screwed up that situation. I'm also glad they added 10 Best Picture nominees, because it was wired that The Usual Suspects, Almost Famous, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind all won Best Screenplay but didn't get a Best Picture nominee. Why are they saying that was the best screenplay of the year but not one of the year's best films? They only did that to get more ratings, but The Dark Knight and WALL-E should have been nominated in 2008. 1976 and 1994 were the 2 best Oscar years ever, as we have Rocky, Network, and All the President's Men and Taxi Driver in 76, and Forrest Gump, The Shawshank Redemption, and Pulp Fiction in 94. Everyone wanted Taxi Driver to win, but that movie was too dark, and Rocky was the most feel-good movie that year. Forrest Gump won because it was the biggest movie that year, while Pulp Fiction wasn't as it wasn't as loved then as it is now, and Shawshank was a box office bomb. Shawshank should have at least won for cinematography. Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, Roger Deakins, godlike cinematography in Shawshank. The most controversial Oscar win is Shakespeare in Love, winning over Saving Private Ryan for Best Picture, which only won because it was a Weinstein film. I gotta hold there, easy, Steven. Let me stop you. I liked Saving Private Ryan. The opening 15, 20 minutes is a knockout. It's one of the best images of war ever put on film. The rest of the film, I don't think, is as Oscar-worthy as some. I loved Shakespeare in Love. I loved it. I thought it was an incredible film. It's wildly entertaining. It's beautifully done. It's a brilliant story. I know, regardless of whether Harvey himself was the prime mover behind that victory, I do think that Shakespeare in Love is the most maligned Oscar winner in history. I love that film. It's fucking great. Anyway, I love Pacino in Scent of a Woman, but Denzel should have won for Malcolm X. That's Denzel's best performance. I don't see why they hate genre films or animation, but those types of films are seen as less than. Stanley Kubrick not winning Best Director for 2001 is the biggest Oscar upset of all time. That is one of the best directed movies ever. I agree. Hitchcock never won an Oscar and should have won for Psycho, which wasn't even nominated for Best Editing. A lot of these Oscar winners don't seem that they're making an impact. 12 Years a Slave and Moonlight are making impacts, but a lot of these movies get forgotten about. Anyway, Rob, I want to love, but they're making a lot of interesting choices in the last few years. Well, thank you, Stephen Collins. What a great letter. I grew up dreaming about the Oscars. I love the Oscars. But I agree with you. I think that there's, again, it comes down to a lot of the time, 2001 is not a beloved movie. It's I'll admit it. It's a hard movie to like. I love it. But there's a lot of moviegoers, even to this day, that think it's a crushing bore. They don't get what Kubrick was going for. And I think a lot of the time, movies also, like, I do think 2001 is still the best science fiction film ever made. A lot of people would disagree with me now, especially audiences today, that seem to, inexplicably to me, reject older films. Don't understand why. I mean, I do understand why. It's not of their universe. I get that. But, I think a lot of the time there is something to be said for populist films winning Oscars. After all, I mean, everyone loved Forrest Gump. It was a cultural, it was everyone, life is like a box of chocolates. I mean, everyone for a year, people still to this day know what you're talking about. I'm Forrest Gump. To me, people look back and say, like, Shakespeare in Love and Forrest Gump should not have won the Oscars. But I'm like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, there might be movies that are deeper and more philosophical, but those movies are both wildly entertaining, and there's something to be said for that too. So, but still, a great letter. Loved your letter. So, thanks for writing in. This letter comes from just Joe. So Joe writes, "Hi Rob, this is Joe. I thought since I had to send you my address for the Alien Legion comics for the Wenwu figure trade that this would be a great first letter." Do we make that trade? "I wanted to talk about my late diagnosis of high-functioning autism and Shang-Chi and how you and our shared communities have helped my quality of life. I always knew I was a bit different growing up. I just never felt like I belonged anywhere. I just didn't fit in. I always took everything literally and was laughed at a lot. It didn't help that I was mixed race. My father is Irish, German, and Polish, and my mother is Korean. I grew up in a very small town that was, by all accounts, racist. I heard every slur by the second grade. I cannot imagine those kids watching Apocalypse Now or Platoon at that age. It was apparent that this was taught to them by their parents and classmates. It did not help that my mother is Korean, because Koreans are very blunt in general anyway. If I was not being bullied for being Asian, I was picked on for being socially awkward. I was the only Asian kid in school until about the 8th grade. I couldn't even share my love for anything with anyone because I was too busy getting attacked for my appearance. This did, however, make me focus my love for creating and drawing. It also made me a fast sprinter. Laugh out loud. Art, I don't mean to laugh, but you made that laugh. You put laugh out loud, so it's okay. Art was my only escape. I can only imagine what it would have been like had we had social media back then. Honestly, I probably would not have been able to handle it. I thought things would be better when another Asian family would move to town. I thought I would be finally accepted. Sadly, I was wrong. Ironically, there is a lot of racism within Asian communities that isn't really talked about. I was not accepted by the town because I was a Korean American, and I was not accepted by the Koreans that moved to town because I was half white. My parents did not support me doing art because they did not think it was a good use of time. I had to hide my drawings. It was extremely difficult just trying to find a place to exist. I did not even fit in at home. With all this on my plate, I really did not know what to do. I just focused on my artwork. I know I have not gotten past a lot of my childhood because it's still so painful to talk about. I think that is why I thought maybe this might help some people out there if I wrote in, to let you know and the community know how much all of you help me on a daily basis. I was a lot more active in the beginning of your channel, but as your channel grew, I got more shy. I think it was because I felt the anxiety of all the people seeing what I was writing in the chat and really holding back because I was too shy. Through the years, I got very good at mirroring, and what you can barely tell that I am autistic. It's still there, though, but I still find the positive in anything and everything. And this community is amazing. There are so many days that I feel like not showing up for life. On those days, I put on Robservations or one of your other shows, and I'm able to pull myself together to do my job at a high level. I'm a product designer by trade. I have done work for several brands that you know. I'll provide you links because I think it's important for you to see what a positive effect you have on me and my work. Please do not share the links because this isn't for that, but I think you really need to see the level of work that you and the community allow me to create. I often think that I would wish I would have gone to school with you because I think we would have been friends. Park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay, as you like to say. Lael, Ryan, Justin, Will, Brendan, Az, John Campia, and yourself are all amazing people. I'm so thankful every day that I have found your communities. I want you to know that you guys do make a difference, not just to me, but so many people out there that struggle every day. You guys show me that I do have a place, that I can have a voice, and most of all, be accepted. I grew up so ashamed of being Asian. I never wanted to have anything to do with my culture. Today's political climate did not help things. I have had so many awful things said to me over the years, I'm not sure how someone can drown themselves, but someone did say that to me, and that was in 2018. And finally, here we are. Shang-Chi. I never thought in my lifetime that something like Shang-Chi would ever happen. I did not have any good Asian superheroes growing up. Comics were frowned upon in my house. I had to hide those too. I never thought that there would be something that would allow me to be a proud Asian American. This film was everything I wanted and everything that I needed it to be. I was proud for the first time in my life about who I am. I could finally hold my head up high. This was truly something. This film is going to be life-changing for some people. It changed my life just like all of you here have. You are all amazing people, and I am so thankful for everyone here. Shang-Chi is my Black Panther. If there is anyone that has not seen it yet, please do. It is an amazing film that represents us in an amazing way. It made me emotional, and I don't really get emotional. The cast and everyone involved with this film deserves applause. It really is amazing. With that, Rob, I will wrap this up. Sorry for such a long letter. I hope I can meet you all someday. If you ever want me to come on during AAPI month or any other time to talk about any of this or fandom, let me know. I am willing to step out of my comfort zone if it can help any kids or adults like me. To everyone in these communities, thank you. You never know what some people go through. Please be kind. Cheers, Joe. You almost got me, Joe. You almost got me. I've only cried once live on this show, but you almost got me. What can I say? I mean, you know, sometimes I'm talking into a green light right now. I've done 742 episodes of this show. And the whole reason to do it is because of you, because of this community and people like yourself and the people that have written into me from the very beginning. I mean, I never take it for granted. You know, I spend a lot of time when I'm not on talking on YouTube contemplating, like, I it's hard for me to believe that I'm just talking about what I love, but that people are as affected as they are, not just by myself, but by this community. And I didn't know when I turned on this camera, and I mean, John Schnepp told me to do it. Elizabeth bought me this microphone. I don't know if I would have done this show. I mean, I thought about it, but it would have been a different show. But getting letters like yours, I can't tell you, first of all, what it means. You know, it's funny, when you make something, when you make a movie, you don't get like a jolt of adrenaline every time somebody goes to see it. I don't know. It takes on a life of its own. Once you make something, you send it out into the world. It becomes the world's. It's no longer yours. But when I do this show and get letters back from you, it makes it all worthwhile. And you know, it's so interesting to me. When I was growing up, our front lawn was shared with the Ishimitsus, which they were a mixed race couple, and it was a white mom and a Japanese dad. We shared a lawn with them. And we had the Aramuras down at the end of the street. And growing up in Seattle, like, I never even considered anyone of Asian descent a minority of any kind here in America. And I grew up loving Asian films. I mean, I loved, obviously, the first Asian movie I remember loving was Rodan. That still to this day is my favorite kaiju movie. I love kaiju movies, and I love Rodan is like a horror film and a kaiju movie, so I love that too. And then growing up, I mean, right now you've got to be having a Korean heritage. I mean, the Korean film, the Korean cinema has just been crushing it for the last 20, 25 years. I mean, you think about things like the stuff Bong Joon-ho was making, or not just winning the Academy Award, but before that, Memories of Murder, The Host. And then there's movies like Train to Busan or I Saw the Devil. I mean, you should be damn proud to have Korean heritage now, because, my God, they're killing it. And, you know, I was able to go to Seoul for the first time in 2018. I loved it. And, you know, Korean ladies are easy on the eyes as well. But it's, I think nowadays, you know, where you grew up, I understand. I mean, I grew up on the Pacific Rim. So in Seattle, and we had a large Asian community. We had an international district and great Chinese food. So, you know, it was never something that it was strange to me. And I've heard a lot from a lot of people that the experience has been obviously very different elsewhere. I'll tell you a funny story. So a friend of mine that I met at USC, her name is Ines, and she was actually a producer on a show, and we lived together for a while. And she had I guess her cousin would come down from San Francisco, a Chinese kid. And whenever he'd come down, he had tricked out his car. Like he did really cool stuff to his car. Like one of the things he had, like his rearview mirror would flip down, and he had his CD controls in his rearview mirror. Did things like that. And I just thought it was so cool. I loved when he would come down and whatever he did. And we went to the Lankershim North Hollywood In-N-Out Burger. And we were just, you know, I was asking about cars and stuff. And he says to me in the middle of the conversation, he stops and he goes, you know, you're like the only Caucasian friend I have. And I was like, and this was like in the early 90s, 93, 94. And I'm like, wait, what? He goes, yeah. I go, but dude, you live in San Francisco, man. Like, come on. He goes, yeah, but I don't have any Caucasian friends. All my friends are Asian. And I'm like, really? You know, it never occurred to me. And you just, and he goes, yeah. He goes, you're really nice. And I said to him, I go, dude, you know, when I think about you, the first thing that I think about is not that you're Asian. I'm like, you're Inessa's cool cousin who comes down and does cool things to their car. Like your acts, your work is the first thing I thought about when it comes to you. As a matter of fact, now that we're talking about it, yeah, I noticed the fact that you're Asian, but it's not the defining characteristic. I mean, I've always thought that way. And I'm sorry that we would have been friends, dude. We totally would have been friends. We probably would have been going to the comic book store together. And I would have actually probably told you that I think people that are half Asian and half Caucasian are usually pretty good looking people. I love mixed race people. I think there's a lot of beauty to be had there. I think that's our genetic destiny. We're all going to be intermingled, and the population of the world in 1,000 years is probably going to be pretty good looking. So, you're probably a very handsome man. So, yes, we would have been friends. But it was weird. I never thought about that. And this was, in the 90s. It never occurred to me. I guess, we talk about things, well, you have white privilege. No, I think I have people privilege. I just grew up liking people. And it's funny, in my mind, I've never defined anyone first and foremost by their race or ethnicity, or their sexuality, or their religious preferences. I just think of people as people. That's why it's maddening when I hear things like critical race theory, and I'm like, no, you're imposing that. If that's what you want to say to our world, that we're all born racists, well, you're wrong, and that's learned behavior. I think there's an argument to be made that genetics, there's probably something deep within us that we have to recognize our own tribes. That was a survival instinct. There's a little bit there, but I don't believe that we're born racists. I think that's learned behavior, and I think, you put a bunch of people together of all different races, as when you're kids, you don't even pay much attention to it. You're taught to pay attention to it later. I mean, my first crush was Nichelle Nichols. I didn't even realize that she was black, per se. I just thought she was hot. I'm like 6 years old. I'm like, yeah, Lieutenant Uhura. Like I said, when you see her exposed midriff in Mirror, Mirror, I'm like, oh, I want that. I didn't know why I wanted it, but I knew I wanted it. And I found out, I've said it before, I was like 8 years old the first time I heard that, the N-word as a slur. And I'm like, what? What? Like, why would you not, what? You're gonna say something bad about Lieutenant Uhura? Them's fighting words, son. But no, I was at Island Park Elementary School the first time I heard that word, and I had to talk to my parents about it. I didn't understand it. I'm like, what, huh? And they explained it to me, and I was just like, it didn't occur to me that people wouldn't like somebody because of their genetic history. And when you really think about it, I mean, if you think about anyone who's darker skinned or of African descent, really, they're the first humans, so shouldn't they be the coolest people on Earth? Because they come from our origins, our beginnings? Wouldn't that make them, I guess, the most valuable people? Because all the rest of us, we're just offshoots. So you can flip that script, But then again, you're putting one person above another person isn't a good thing. We're all human beings. There's one of each of us, right? But thank you. What a moving letter. You certainly got to me. You pulled my heartstrings. And Joe, it means the world to me that you have written this kind of a letter and that you would share it with the whole community. And, there's been some cantankerous stuff going on in the Post-Geek singularity, which bothers me. People going after one another a little bit. I don't like it. There's no reason to be that way. And I'm sorry, look, I would prefer not to have moderators at all. But there's a lot of people that aren't, new members of the community, or people that just discover the show as we get more and more subscribers to the channel, and they don't quite know. And all I would ask is that we maintain politeness and respect for everyone who's here until they have lost our respect. I don't like it when that happens, but I do feel it means the world to me. I mean, look, getting a letter like yours and getting an endorsement by UNESCO yesterday for my work, I'm telling you, it's pretty good, man. Being alive right now is pretty good. And I thank you. Thank you for writing in. Well, I'm not going to follow that letter up, even though I have a lot more letters. I'm going to jump in and see what are you guys saying? I have no idea. Let's go back and see what's going on here. Let's see. This first letter that comes in is from, let's go back. Terrier, all the way from Norway, says, I've not abandoned you, my friend, but since you never have me on your own show, I had to go and make my own show with blackjack and hookers. To quote a famous robot, have to go, kids to entertain. You can come on my show whenever you want. Mario Lopez says, Rob, I know you love the MCU, but to me, the overpowered Captain Marvel and especially Loki destroyed a giant part of my love for this universe. Loki made all other movies irrelevant. Well, I don't know if that's true, Mario. I mean, we'll see where it goes, but it's different timelines, and I mean, it's yeah, different. Wait and see. But I can understand where you're coming from with that. It's just again one part of the universe. Carlos Herrera sends in a super chat and says, "Rob, 3D DLP active glasses recommendation." Ooh, Carlos, I couldn't give you active glasses recommendation now because mine are from 2013. My 3D plasma TV is 8 years old now, and it is the last Panasonic that was made, and I love those glasses. I have not looked into 3D glasses anytime recently, so I probably couldn't give you an accurate. I'm sorry, I would have to look into it myself, and I have not done that, so I apologize. But there are great resources online. I would just say go read the reviews. That's what I usually do when I'm looking for electronics. Don't skip this the fourth time sends in a tip and says, future filmmakers need to learn business and finance themselves. It is the only way forward. United Artists 2.0. What editing program do you use? What is your process? Oh, wow. Okay. First of all, I agree with that. Independent filmmakers need to learn finance. It's really, really, and really, really important. They need to learn how to budget and schedule their own movies. I completely agree. It is the only way forward. United Artists 2.0 refers back to the dawn of the talkies, when we had a lot of famous people come together, famous stars come together to create United Artists, which was at the time a very cool thing. And now what editing program? So yes, I believe, but I think we've got that. I think the modern day YouTube, all these things, it's great where we're at now. You can make things and the world can see them. It's incredible. What editing program do you use? Well, I use a lot. It really depends. So I've used Final Cut, Avid, Adobe Premiere, and now DaVinci Resolve's editorial. They've taken DaVinci is pretty much the industry standard for color grading, but they've also incorporated editorial into DaVinci Resolve, which is pretty good. So I use all of those things depending on the job. I'm not as familiar with Adobe Premiere, but I've been using it for Dota Dragon's Blood. We cut on Premiere. I believe it or not, I think I'm the only person in the world that cut a feature film on Final Cut X, Final Cut Pro, Final Cut 10, call it what you want. I don't know if I would do it again. I love Avid for film, but again, depending on how you want to use it, it really depends on your what you're using it for. And as far as my process, my editorial process is, I will tell you this. I like to start from the beginning. When I'm working on a feature film, if I'm not familiar with the script, I don't like to read the script before. Like if I'm hired to cut a film that was already shot, and that happens with independent movies, I don't like to read the script first. And you'll ask, people will be like, wait, what? Because the script doesn't matter to me. What matters is what's shot. So what I like to do is watch all the dailies, and depending on how the director wants to work, I usually start from the beginning, even though you don't have to. Scene one, and you start, usually it's a montage or something, but say scene one's a dialogue scene, it's got a teaser or something. I start with scene one, and I look at all the takes. I look at all the coverage. And the story that's being told emerges from that coverage. Now, what happens is, once I start looking at that scene and I do a cut, like a lot of the time an editor will build an assembly or do a cut of a sequence or a scene and then show the director, and then you both delve into it together. So that's kind of my process is I'll usually cut together something first, and then the director sees it, and then we work on it together. Then we go in, the director and I work together, sitting down together, going through. I love working with directors. I love it. It's so much fun. It's very creatively gratifying. So that's usually my process. I first organize all the material into various bins. Usually I organize by bins by scene. I have scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. I have all the coverage from each scene in a bin with its sequence, and that's how I organize the movies when I'm cutting them. That way we can always go back. So we have the finished versions of each scene, the sequence, in a bin with all the footage, and then I will have a timeline with the entire film laid out. So if we want to then go back in and work on scene 56, sometimes scenes all butt up together, scenes 56, 57, 58 are all one thing, but then, and in that case, I'll put them all into one bin. But then I have the scenes, if you want to go back into and look at the coverage again, you've got each scene and all the takes in one place. So I don't know if that's at all helpful. We did a great show with Lael last night. How great was that? Midnight Metal. So there you go. Thanks for that tip. I think it's funny. You're my co-host and you still send in tips. You're the best. Willow. Hello, Willow. How are you? Willow says, if you play a holodeck program and end up having a fling with a holographic character, not a sentient one like the Doctor, would you consider that to be infidelity? That's a good question. You say if it's not a sentient program and it is a holographic character and it's just a computer, I guess that's like a sex toy. And if it's not real, but if the character was sentient, like if I fell in love with an emergency medical hologram that was a female that had an emotional life, I think that would be cheating. I do. And Star Trek: The Next Generation, and specifically Star Trek: Deep Space Nine, we've met societies that were actually holographic, and they didn't even know necessarily that they were, but they were people. So that's a really interesting. See, here's the thing. That, to me, is what a modern Star Trek episode should be about. Not that you want to deal with marital infidelity, but that story, that idea is a really interesting Star Trek story. And they've delved into that. Is a holographic, if there's a whole civilization of holographic people that are sentient, and they have their own, to themselves, they have their own minds and their own lives, are they alive? Are they valid? That's a good question, but if they're not sentient, it's masturbation. It's sex toys, and that would be like when I'm fantasizing as I'm, pulling my pud, whatever you want to call it. If I'm jerking off or something and I'm fantasizing about somebody, is that an infidelity? I don't think it is. I think that it's having a creative inner life is fine. I mean, infidelity, I think infidelity has to do more with you're not getting something from your partner and you have to go outside of your relationship. That's the problem with infidelity. It's emotional, and you're running away from the responsibility you have to your partner, I think. There you go. 200-Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, Rob, congratulations. Well deserved. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. That's very nice of you to say. Tom Jr. Jackson says, Kino Lorber is going to release To Live and Die in LA in 4K? Did you know? No, dude. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Is Kino Lorber really putting out To Live and Die in LA in 4K? Oh my God, dude. I'll order like 6 copies. I'll have to get one. It's very funny. I've got 4 copies on Blu-ray. I'm going to have to go back and get the 4K copy if they're released in other countries all again. Dos Gecko sends in a super chat and says, can Vision Atlas finance an indie you direct? After you left the Drinker's stream, I asked who should take over Trek. Gary and the Drinker voted for you. I agree. Oh, did they? That's so nice. Well, the thing about taking over Trek is I've never worked in television other than Femme Fatales. I don't have the resume to take over Trek. I mean, I just don't. I think that if I was tasked to take over Star Trek, I would put together an A-list group of writers that I know understand genre. I mean, 2 of the people I would tap immediately, and they would be the executive producers, are Ashley Edward Miller and Zach Stentz. I mean, I would go to Kay Rendell. I would go Javier. There's so many people I know that have worked. Gabrielle Stanton. That's what I don't understand. There are so many television writers that are working that understand genre and science fiction, that have worked in genre and science fiction. I don't know why we don't get more of those writers. But Vision Atlas I don't think they really finance indie movies so much as they would be distributors. But we'll see, because I got some things percolating. I will I'll keep you informed. Fat Steven Seagal is here. Hello, sir. Sad day when Pluto Nash is more creative than Star Trek. Man, you are correct about that. 200-Watt Studio comes back and says, Theodore Sturgeon, Jerome Bixby, Harlan Ellison, David Gerald wrote for the original series. All of them are writers beyond Star Trek. They've written stories. They've written novels. Now with Disco and Picard, we have people that had mothers who probably smoked or drank while they were in the womb. Well, I think all of our mothers must have done that, because back in the day. So, but yeah, that's pretty funny. I mean, that's the thing. I don't understand. I mean, yes, you could say that Michael Chabon came in and did that, but I was actually woefully disappointed in Michael Chabon's involvement in Star Trek. I thought we would get a lot better, because I have his books on the shelf over here. I'm a big fan, and I was quite disappointed in his tenure on Trek. I expected more from him. Has not diminished my love of his work, by the way. I just thought we'd get better Trek. Our friend Gil Cardinal Sin is here. Rob, I'm still halfway behind you, but I wanted to say how proud I am for the success of Tango Shalom, and I hope it brings you many bigger things. Well, thank you. I mean, right now it's not necessarily a financial success, which is all Hollywood cares about, but you know what? It's the fact that it's in theaters even right now is a award in itself. 200-Watt Studio sends in a super chat, but thank you. I appreciate that, Gil. 200-Watt Studio continues on and says, while not his best work, Cry Macho is a nice film about someone that wanders into lives and makes them better for a bit while doing the same for himself. Well, what's not to love about that? Also, the story of Cry Macho is crazy. That was a film that was written in the early 70s, and no one wanted to make it. Then the writer of the script turned it into a novel, which gained some success, and then suddenly studios wanted to make it. They've been trying to make that movie since the 70s. And Clint Eastwood, at 90, can you believe it, got it made. So yeah, amazing. Dos Gecko says, I'm worried for online culture. People label, name call, and try and cancel without doing research. Why do you think people are so quick to take sides now? Ooh, man. Well, first of all, I totally agree with you. I have a theory. And my theory is, when you're working on your own material, when you're delving into whatever it is, when you're working on your own stuff, you're not paying much attention to who else is doing what, because you're absorbed in whatever it is you're doing, whether you're an artist or whether you're a writer or whoever you are. But I think that there is a desire now, especially in the online world. You can see sometimes immediate results. You can feel that you matter. You take someone to task. I see this a lot on my own Twitter feed. There's a lot of people that come after me and say really mean things. You know, like, I hate you. You know, I despise Robert Meyer Burnett. I'm like, okay. You know, you can. But what I find really interesting is they'll say it to me. And I always wonder, like, how am I supposed to answer that? Like, I've never said I despise you. I mean, I say I despise people's work, but I don't sit there and go, and you know, that's maybe not true. Maybe I've said a lot of bad things about Alex Kurtzman, but it's because of his work. He could be a very nice guy. I don't know him. But I do think because you can get a jolt of satisfaction. You get, if you go after somebody, you immediately, if they acknowledge you, like on Twitter, I mean, I try and acknowledge people. If someone comes after me and says something mean and I write back to them, they get satisfaction. And I think that our society, especially with our social media society, everyone wants to feel relevant. Everyone wants to feel that they make a difference somehow. And I think people that think that they're righteous, that they're doing the right thing, that they're trying to make a difference, that they're coming at it like, I know best, I want social justice. So they go after people and they think they are doing good works. And they really do. I think they think they're doing the right thing, and they get satisfaction from it without understanding the wider ramifications. I think it's quite insidious. I mean, those who live in glass houses, or throwing stones or don't judge lest ye be judged. I mean, I find it interesting, but I think it's harder and harder and harder to find satisfaction, personal satisfaction in the modern age. I mean, to me, I've always been satisfied by the work I've done. I've been lucky since I was a little kid. I always had jobs I really liked. I started working in video stores when I was 13. I worked at a frame store on Mercer Island because I wanted to frame my own movie posters. But I learned how to cut glass and cut molding, and I had a good time. I really love that stuff. So, yeah. And I've been lucky in that I've found my life to be very fulfilling. Have I had the financial success I would have loved? No. But, I have enough success. It's kept me, I have a nice place to live, and I have a nice girlfriend, and I have a nice life. But I don't feel the need that I have to go after necessarily other people. And I think that we live in a world that people are a lot less satisfied with their own lives now. So by taking up a crusade, taking up a cause, and thinking they can make a difference is something that fulfills them. I just think that doing it at the expense of other people is insidious. And it's getting worse. And, I fully expect that people that should be on my side of the fence, I mean, I considered myself a classical liberal. I always have, a left-leaning classical liberal. But like I've said, the left scares me a lot more than the right. Because the right, I mean, they're very upfront with their beliefs and all that. But the left, man, they'll come after you. They'll stab you in the back. And you won't see it coming. And that scares me. People that should be on our side. So there you go. Chris C says, "Hey Rob, have you seen the Mezco on Ultimate Godzilla? It's almost 3 feet long, lights and sounds. Check out Big Bad Toy Store." No, I have not, but oh my God, I'll have to have that. I need a big Godzilla. I have little Godzillas, but I don't have a big Godzilla. I need a big Godzilla. Cardinal Sin. So, wait, actually, Terrier says, "Latino Slant, Pauly, had a karaoke show today with requests. I tipped him and got him to sing To Live and Die in L.A. It was glorious. Oh, man, I'm going to go watch that. I didn't know Pauly did that. That's amazing. Cardinal Sin says, "I can't wait to drag my friends and family to Tango Shalom." Please do. I hope it comes there. Fernando Barrero sent me something which I have yet to open. I got a box in the mail from Fernando Barrero that I actually opened today, but I didn't open up what it is. I wanted to bring it on the show and open it up, which I'll probably do tomorrow. So, Fernando, I don't even think I showed the T-shirt you sent me, but you sent me something. I don't know what that is, but I will open it on the show. Hi, RMB. My mom wanted me to tell you how much she was moved after seeing Tango Shalom. The message of love and how each faith was portrayed with respect were aspects of the movie. She would not stop talking about it. She ranks the movie among her favorites. Well, that's very nice of your mom. Thank you. Tell her thank you very much for going to see it. That means a lot. Das Gecko goes on to say, "What better way to feel virtuous than to call someone else racist or sexist? But it happens without evidence. People just pass on others' opinions." I agree. I mean, like I was saying before, the review, this really, really scathing, it felt deeply personal, the review, of Tango Shalom, had a lot of misinformation in it, and the person made assumptions about the release of the movie and that it sat on a shelf and was just eviscerating the film. But on the other hand, I read that review the same day as UNESCO tweeted out that they endorsed the movie. So, you take the good with the bad. That's the dichotomy of life. On one hand, you might get a hideously awful review where it leaves your blood boiling, and then at the same time, UNESCO tweets out there. That's what you make art, you make anything that the public is going to judge. There will be people that like it and people that hate it. There's nothing you can do about that. And you just have to let it slide off you. If you know that you did the best work that you can, and I know how much work we put into Tango Shalom, I know it's not for everybody. I know there's a lot of Borscht Belt humor in it. I know a lot of it's a throwback. There's a lot of sitcom-y stuff. I know all these things. I know all these things, and they're not wrong when people are pointing these out in reviews. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily the way some people say it is. But to them, it is. You know, everyone comes at things from different points of view, so you can't get angry. But I don't understand, like, people go after, they'll take one thing. Like, look, I was taken to task and canceled and thrown off the Schmodown by one tweet. I've made 100,000 tweets. One tweet I made that somebody objected to. That, by the way, was taken out of context anyway. And if someone doesn't understand, like, sometimes I have a sardonically dark sense of humor. But people that I work with, no one even bothered to call and say, hey, man, what do you mean by this? So what can you do? I think we all need to stop worrying less about other people and worry more about ourselves. I mean, we had a law passed in Texas which actually encourages people to inform on their fellow citizens to get them in trouble. And there's a financial incentive behind it. What does that say about us as a nation? Look, I understand there is an argument to be made. I am 100% staunchly pro-choice. I think a woman's body is a woman's body, period. Do I believe in third trimester abortions? I do not. I don't believe in late-term abortions unless it has something directly to do with the health of the mother. The health of the mother must always take precedence. And I don't believe in third trimester abortions. I am adopted. I know I was this close to never existing. My biological mother was sitting in the waiting room of a clinic about to have an abortion procedure at 17 years old, and at the very last second decided she couldn't go through with it. And that's why I exist. But you know what? I would never say that a woman should have the right to control her own body to be taken away from her. Much less, we now have an entire state of people that are incentivized to look for people and go after them. What does that say about us? I mean, to me, that's the ultimate, and it's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah. 200 Watt Studio says, how is it that the great people in this chat can inspire a great Star Trek premise? It's all about taking a concept and asking what if and the ramifications. Oh, I completely agree with you. That's that what if and what happens, or extrapolate. Like, that's why I can't stand watching Star Trek that takes place in the 30th century and you have a non-binary character tell a gay character that you need to use my own pronouns. I mean, give me a break. Those conversations are not going to be had in 1,000 years. They're just not. And to watch that in modern Star Trek, I'm like, now, if the Discovery journeyed to a planet where the alien civilization had problems with pronouns and all this, and it was in an interesting sci-fi context, I'd be like, okay, that's really interesting. You know, what if there was a society that could change gender at will? Or you could go have surgical procedures and people could literally, like, you could live as a man, and then if you wanted to, you could change your gender and be a woman and give, like, I'll tell you something. If I could have the opportunity to change my gender and carry a child to term, I would do it. I would totally do it. I would have no problem living as a woman and have a child and carry that child to term. I think that experience would be fascinating. I think changing gender and having sex with a guy would be fascinating. What does that feel like? I don't know. It would make me as a dude better in bed, right? But it would be fascinating. If that was a possibility, I would totally do it. If I could completely change my gender and live for a couple of years as a woman, I would. It'd be interesting. Maybe my personality would change so much, I'd like being a woman so much that I would stay a woman. But I think if we had that technology, and in the future, we would. I would love to see a Star Trek episode that dealt with that. You know, I think our Star Trek has become horribly infantilized. And the way it's dealing with, like, people are like, oh, look at representation. Representation is great, but if it's bad representation, if it's representation at a 7th grade level, does that do anybody any good? I mean, I would love to see a character that you know, if you really want to deal with representation, show us more people. Like, what if you have a character that's in a throuple or whatever, you know, has 2 spouses? What would that be like? And they're main characters on the show. Show us something like that. We get no interesting extrapolated upon ideas. We get fantasy weird ideas. Some kid, his genetic bond is with dilithium, and his scream caused all the dilithium to burn up. This is pure fantasy. This is not science fiction. That's one of the reasons I can't stand modern Star Trek. It is all fantasy. It's all gobbledygook. It has no basis in science at all. And the micellular network. I mean, let me tell everybody something. There was no spore drive. That is the dumbest magic shit I've ever heard. And that's one of the things. Why are you changing that? The spores, the way that Brian Fuller, the original conception of the micellular network, was all about terraforming. And if you know anything about fungi and all that, it's fascinating. Mushrooms are fascinating. And that was what they were using, terraforming. They were using the micellular network to terraform planets, not to travel through space. It's so stupid. But they had to bastardize the original concept so they could move it away so Alex Kurtzman could stamp "created by" on it. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a rant. Evan Newman sends in a tip and says, I made it to season 4 of DS9 in my all things Star Trek watch through. I enjoy having Worf on the show, but it feels like Quark's character has been reduced as a result. Unfortunately, as no one was removed to make way for Worf. Hope Quark gets to shine again. I think Quark does. He gets to shine. He does. You'll see. 200 Watt Studio says, and the paid writers of New Trek can comprehend that concept. I don't know. Yeah. Glenn Mark, I hope you saw that I got your super chats at the beginning of this, well, after I did my subject, but it's good to see you again. It was only moments ago I was sending one of these. On your recommendation on a stream, I'm checking out Jonathan Mayberry's first book. I may send a review. Now, he's written a lot of books that are not part of the Joe Ledger series. I am particularly a fan of Joe Ledger's, his series about Joe Ledger. I think the book is Patient Zero is the first Joe Ledger book. Check it out, man. But even if it's not a Joe Ledger book, I love Jonathan Mayberry's work. Right back. Tell me what you think, Glenn Mark, and thanks for supporting the channels. Dos Gecko says, think of YouTubers like Geeks and Gamers, Nerdrotic, and Yellow Flash. People criticize them for being racist or sexist, but tend to not watch them. Now, I agree with that. I think that I'm predisposed to liking things more, but, Gary is a huge fan. Look at his set. He's a huge fan of comics and Star Trek and Lord of the Rings. And a lot of the things that Gary talks about, I don't disagree with. I think that storytelling is being sacrificed for agendas. And I think to me, I don't mind the agendas. I really don't. I think that we do need social justice more than we have. I think we do need marginalized people need to have a voice. I do think that there needs to be rights for trans people. I do think that LGBTQ issues need to be addressed in society. I believe all of those things. However, I think that great storytelling is being destroyed by people with agendas that are bastardizing stories and making stories less good in order to further their own agendas. And I'm like, I don't mind you furthering your own agenda, but why do it at the expense of the story? I mean, if you can work something into a story, like for instance, Star Trek did it well with Trills. I loved Rejoined, when Jadzia finds her former spouse, who happens to also now be in the body of a female, and they hook up. To me, that's an interesting examination of if you want to address, that's what science fiction, allegorical science fiction does best. Bring that on. I'm perfectly into having a story like that. Yes. But, I do feel that Star Trek Discovery is incredibly pandering and tokenistic with their portrayal of these characters. And a lot of people, because they've never seen themselves portrayed in Star Trek before, are big fans. And that's one of the things I can't begrudge people who love Discovery for that reason. I can't sit there and go, well, now you have a character, you have a loving relationship, a gay relationship being portrayed in Star Trek. Great. But unfortunately, one of those characters was brought back from the dead. And I watched, and now we're going to do the same thing with Adira's significant other coming back from the dead. Like, come on, man. That to me undermines. This is fantasy. I mean, it's not science fiction. It is fantasy, and I can't stand it for that reason. If you want to show me a non-binary person having a relationship with a trans person, great. Do it. But don't bring one of them back from the dead. Don't turn a science fiction show into an out-and-out fantasy. Show me that relationship. Make it work. You know, and if you're going to do that, talk about what are some of the things that are different. If you're a non-binary person and you're in a relationship with a trans person, is it different than a heterosexual relationship or a straight gay relationship or just a relationship in general? And if it is, show it to us. Give me some insight into what that means. And or maybe it means nothing. Maybe it's no different than having, because I have a friend that I've worked with who I think is an incredible actor who has one of the most romantic relationships ever. He's I believe they're married, him and his husband, and I watch their Facebook feed. Always puts a smile on my face because they clearly are madly in love with each other and they're having a great time. Show me that, you know, give me some insight, but don't sacrifice the story that you're telling so you can give us an agenda. And I think that's what a lot of what Gary is saying, and he's pointing that stuff out. I'm a little bit more forgiving. But I don't think he's wrong, and I think I'll tell you something. I think that's doing a huge disservice to our society. I do. And I want to hear the voices that like Moonlight. Fantastic film, I thought. I had not heard that story told before. I think our civilization is better off because we have movies like Moonlight that exist. I hadn't heard that story before. It's something I thought was a wonderful, beautiful film. And it's something that's when I want to hear new voices, let those voices tell the stories that they want to tell. And like a Moonlight. There's a reason it won Best Picture. And I think we need more of those voices. They need to be heard. But when you're going back and destroying classical storytelling to do it, is that a good thing? You know, that's why I think representation is not enough. You need great stories and great characters. Then within those stories, there's where you get your representation. It must be organic to the story that you're telling. Just a thought. So let's see. 200 Watt Studio sends in you're on fire today, 200 Watt Studio. Thanks for the support. Twilight Zone did the what if you could buy a new body premise 60 years ago. You're right. It's not a stretch to do that premise with changing genders. Oh, I agree. I think it'd be a fantastic story to do. And like I said, I mean, I would actually, if you could literally go with Star Trek, with the technology of the 23rd century or even the 32nd century, if you could go in and literally change genders, I'd do that for a couple of years. I'd do it because I'd be interested to see what's it like. What's it like to live like a woman? I'd love to be but like, you know, they could probably change you at like the fundamental DNA level. So, you know, I'd want to know. Or maybe they could transmute or something. You could find people like, what if you could, like Janice Lester? We saw it in Star Trek. We saw it in Turnabout Intruder. You know, Kirk and switched essences with Janice Lester. I mean, she was literally a woman. Man, if I was turned into a woman, I wouldn't mind living as a woman for a couple of years to see what it was like. Gain insight you could never gain any other way. I would totally go get pregnant. I have all kinds of sex with dudes. See what that's like. Because I'd be a woman, so I would assume that, you know, I wouldn't. I mean, I'd say I'm a relatively straight person. You could call me gay adjacent because I had lots of gay friends in my whole life. So that doesn't. But wouldn't it be interesting? Wouldn't it be interesting to explore if you swapped bodies? I mean, I think that'd be kind of cool. And I'd love to have a kid. What's that like? I'd love to. What is morning sickness like? I don't know. I'd want to find out. But yeah, to me that's great. That's a great science fiction story. So. I'm with you. Terje from Norway. Terje says, strangely in Norway, we have a saying when something is crazy off the rails, we say it has gone totally Texas. Is that true? Did you say totally Texas in Norway? These days, I get it. Hashtag no offense. Totally Texas. Yeah, man. I don't understand. Don't get it. Do not get it. Well, anyway, folks, I'm going to bring Robservations episode number 742 to an end. I want to thank everybody for the generous support of this channel. I want to thank all of my letter writers. My God, you guys, do you write great letters. I want to thank my moderating staff. Joshua Levesque is here. I don't know who else is here today. Louise X Sparrow is here. I didn't know Louise was such a Star Trek fan, by the way. Follow Louise X Sparrow on Twitter. Greg Smith. Hello, Greg Smith. That's good to have Greg Smith here. So thank you. If I've missed anybody, I'm sorry. I don't know how back. I can't go back any further in the live chat. But I want to thank those moderators for being here. And again, thanks everybody for supporting the channel through tips and super chats. I appreciate that. And especially our letter writers today. Man, oh man. Some great letters. And on that note, hey, if you live in the Palm Springs or Miami areas, or even in Scottsdale, Arizona, please roll out to see Tango Shalom. It's still in theaters for another week, which is great. We'll see if we go to another city or not. But if not, you can see the movie on VOD on October 29th. And hopefully it'll be picked up by a streaming service near you. And on that note, I would say to all of you, first of all, come on, join me and Dave Parker on Midnight Metal tonight. Who knows what's going to happen? But remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And on that note, I would say to all of you, as always, have a better day.